Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Small Screen Star Wars. As always, I'm Julian Mush, and I am once again joined by Rachel
Hello.
Wilkinson. I almost forgot to say your last name.
Fine.
Well, I'm just not used to saying
don't
your
like
full
it that
name all the
much.
time.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, aren't you gonna your name's gonna change?
It is. Yeah.
You decided that?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't
you're
care
okay
about
with
my
that?
last name. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I probably won't change it on. I'm probably not gonna go through the hassle of actually changing it, but I'll
Like
change
you have
it on,
that
like,
you have
some
that
things.
freedom. Like you don't have to change anything. Like your driver's license, you can just keep it if you want.
You don't have to change legally. You could just change your Instagram and or you can just go by
Okay,
another
so
name.
well, that's
from
what I
work and
mean. That's like if you're gonna
Yeah.
change it, then it seems odd that I feel like that's like a legal process that you go through when you're married. But again, I don't.
Yeah, but I
know.
mean, I can change my name on social media to whatever I want, and
Yeah, of
my
course. You
email
could be-
signature for work.
you could be
but
Big Butt 69 if
Yeah.
you wanted on
It's not like
Instagram.
the government's gonna come for me and be like, "Hey, you changed your last name on Instagram. You got
Yeah, but you're gonna have to
change
change your
license."
passport and all those other things, right?
Yeah, if you change your ID, then
Yeah.
you need to change your passport. I have a 10-year one that's up. I don't know, in a couple years. So whenever that happens, then I'll change everything.
Best thing that ever happened to passports was 10-year passports.
Yeah.
I have mine is also coming up next year. I realized that, and I set a reminder on my phone
Yeah.
to remind me to renew it, so that I didn't forget. Because I have to travel for work now, and if I was like,
yeah,
I'm going to speaking of next week, so I'll be out of town next week in the balmy destination of Wichita, Kansas.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, which you know what? To be honest, I'm fine. I've never been to Kansas before. I'm excited to try the barbecue because I hear barbecue is
that's
great
true.
in Kansas. But
Is Wichita the capital?
I
No.
don't know.
Kansas City.
Kansas City's in Missouri.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's on the border.
Okay.
There's a little bit of it, I think, is in
All
Kansas
right.
also. Yeah.
I was like, why do I? Not that I shouldn't know, but Wichita's a big city, obviously in Kansas.
I don't know. Should we find out? This seems like a good place to do this. Wichita.
I was like, what's the thing about Wichita? Isn't there something big about Wichita?
It says is in South Central Kansas, which I can corroborate on the map. Science exhibits, et cetera, et cetera.
That thing looks cool, whatever that is.
Oh yeah, I don't know what was that. What do you think that was? Exploration Place. Okay,
Whatever that is.
It looks like
cool.
a museum. Kind of looks like Regina,
A little bit.
and that's you can take that for what it's worth.
That looks like the bridge in Winnipeg.
It does. It does. Looks like that looks like could be in Fort White.
All right.
It looks. You know what? It looks homey to me.
Yeah, there you go.
Coming from Winnipeg, so it should be interesting. Is Wichita a good place to live? Asks someone on Google. Wichita is in Sedgwick County and is one of the best places to live in Kansas, which is not really, again, the bar. Living in Wichita
Don't
offers
offend our
residents.
Kansas
I'm
listeners.
not. Living in Wichita offers residents a dense suburban feel, and most residents own their own homes. In Wichita, there are a lot of coffee shops and parks. Many families and young professionals live in Wichita,
Well then.
and residents tend to lean conservative. Shocker. Shocker. Anywho, I'll be that. So all that is to say, next week the live session. And of course, we are recording this live on Twitch and YouTube. The live session is going to be done on probably Saturday, so next Saturday. And also, heads up, it looks like next week is going to be a double episode drop on Disney Plus. If IMDb's episode guide is to be believed, the episodes will be titled. It's like infiltration, exfiltration, something like that. Infiltration and extraction.
Yes, yeah.
And so they're both marked for the 13th. So just keep that in mind. It's probably going to be a good one. We don't want to try to rush it around travel schedule. So
Right.
we'll do Saturday like we did last week. And then I think from there, things should be pretty steady. But
Yeah.
it's hard to say.
You're still going to be in Kansas on Saturday, though.
No, I'll be back.
Oh,
by
you'll
then.
be back. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'll be back by then.
Okay, cool.
No, I'll be back by Friday. But again, it's just no sense rushing things.
Okay, sweet. So, yeah, I can do that in person then.
Yeah, and fans of the show might remember that I've recorded many of these episodes while traveling for work,
Yeah.
including very awkwardly in hotel rooms in Sydney and in Hunter Valley and all these other places around Australia and Japan and other
I
stuff.
think the best is when you're at the lake and you had to record in your car,
Yeah.
down the road.
Yeah. I was at the lake and I hopped in the car because the reception's not good enough at the
Yeah.
lake. And you know what? Still wasn't really good enough, to be honest,
Yeah.
even down the road.
Yeah, that one was funny.
With the prevalence of Starlink now, I'm hoping we can get real internet at the cabin. So we'll see. And then I could just live there full time. That would be great. Actually, no, I don't think so. I like living in the city. I take it back.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we talking about today? We're talking about Star Wars: The Bad Batch, Season 3, Episode 5, The Return, which, pretty on the nose title. We're talking about Crosshair returning to the titular Bad Batch, but also we're returning to a familiar destination from last season.
Right.
From what many people say is the best episode of the series, although I'm not necessarily ready to agree with that yet. I'll have to do more thinking, but it is really high up on the list, and we're talking about the Outpost from last year.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Also, a little below, we have the return of Echo, if that counts.
Yeah, you know what? Good point. Technically, yes, Echo's, and who conspicuously missing? Rex.
Yeah. Where's Rex?
Where is Rex? I think we'll see him next week.
Mm-hmm.
That's my hunch. So that's the plan. We're gonna break that down, review, recap as we typically do. Before we get into it, really quick news story because this one is hilarious. I don't know if you saw this going around on the social media, but it was revealed that when Star Wars, like the original trilogy, was airing on television in Chile, okay, that they didn't want to interrupt the movie with commercials. So instead, they inserted commercials into the movie.
What?
Yes, it is so crazy.
How is that
Star Wars.
How do you do that?
Sir, I'll show you. Cerveza.
Okay, then you're not.
Cerveza.
You've typed in Star Wars.
It's okay. It got to where it got to where I wanted to go. It's unbelievable. It's so funny. Okay, here we go. I'm not going to play them all. You can go look it up on YouTube.
Perhaps you know me as the Kung Fu.
Sorry, that is Kung Fu Panda ad. So we're just gonna quickly mute.
Yeah,
that.
we're not sponsored by Kung Fu Panda.
No,
unfortunately.
That would be
so we're
sweet.
not going to play their thing
or
for free.
TD Bank. We're neither of those sponsors. This is why you should pay for YouTube Premium. Okay, so
Clone Wars. Yes.
This is,
I was once a Jedi.
of course, the actual moment from the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, this is unreal. There's a bunch of them, but I'm not going to do them all.
Galaxy. And he was a good friend. Which reminds me, I have something here for you.
No.
So for those who maybe are listening and not watching, when Obi-Wan goes to get Anakin's lightsaber from his tool chest, instead of a lightsaber inside the chest, they somehow filmed someone's hand with a robe opening a chest, and inside is a cooler of ice with beer inside. So there's a bunch of them. There's one from there's two from the original New Hope. And then there's one from Empire, and there's one from to be honest, the one from Return of the Jedi might be the funniest one. So maybe we'll do that.
Father can never be turned from the dark side. So will it be with you.
It is pointless to resist, my son.
Oh no. So they have a guy's hand painted white with a robe. It's supposed to look like the Emperor's hand. And as he sits down on the throne, he force pulls a can of Cerveza Cristal.
This is wild.
Yes.
This looks like something that a meme page would just make.
No, this is real.
This is incredible.
And what's even funnier is that Pablo Hidalgo, which is a longtime member of the story group, a friend of the show, has been on the show before.
Yeah.
His family immigrated from Chile early on, so he has connections to Chile.
Okay.
But he didn't even know this was a thing, and he discovered it, which is, I think, even a fun subplot on this whole thing. It's just a really kind of wholesome Star Wars story.
I don't understand how this is better than just showing a commercial because it's so funny though. It's so good.
You got to respect their creativity.
I love this. There's something about a fake emperor's hand.
Yes,
for
I know.
Cerveza
And like
Crystal.
doing like the obvious thing,
So
which is
good.
to like drop the can, but then play that clip in reverse so that it comes back into the can.
Oh,
Ah, man. Again, truly
it.
amazing. So
whoever decided that, bravo.
yeah,
Nice.
you have to
Amazing.
respect the creativity. So yeah, that I had to mention that. I don't think there's anything else really going on. Other than I did see Dune 2 in the theater the other day. Really amazing movie, and there's obvious connections to this episode, as we'll see
Right.
later. Okay, quick correction. So at the very beginning of the season, we always do the intro helmets from the Star Wars intro. So they recently just caught up with that on the Screen Crush recaps, and I got most of them right. And I'm not even convinced that Ryan Airy got all of them right, to be honest.
Fair enough.
But some of the ones that were question marks for me, which was I thought one was a rogue, like a rebellion pilot, is actually a clone pilot helmet, which is pretty
okay.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one, which I thought was maybe like a TK training, like a TK trooper training helmet,
Mm-hmm.
looks like it's probably actually Wrecker's helmet.
Oh,
So
okay.
those two I think are actual correct. And then there is one that looks like maybe an AT-AT driver, but it has like the Vader flaps, that like Vader
Yeah.
helmet shape. He was saying that was a TK trooper, but I haven't seen a TK trooper with those flaps, so I don't know. That one's still a mystery to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Friend of the show, Ryan Airy, doesn't know we exist. Okay.
One day.
Yeah,
One day he'll send us a cease and desist.
I should just send him a clip of this
Friend
part
of
of
the
the
show.
episode. Yeah.
Stop telling people we're friends.
That's right. Well, it's better than there's this weird trend with podcasts. I don't know if you see this with a lot of podcasts you listen to, but I listen to a lot. And there's this weird thing that people do where they like to refer to themselves as the only blank podcast, like the only Star Wars podcast, which is obviously
It's a
not
wild
true.
thing to say.
But like it's this,
Yeah.
and then it becomes this like fun running joke that they always have. But like because so many shows do it, like literally 3 or 4 that I listen to have a similar like running joke going on.
right.
It's like now it irks me, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fall into that trap.
We're just gonna pretend we're friends with people.
Okay,
We're not.
yeah,
It's our thing.
well, yeah, exactly. Our thing is not being friends with people. All right, so we'll quickly talk about the episode as a whole.
Mhm.
So last week, I mentioned that I would be interested if this episode, looking forward to this week, was going to be like more subdued and really just a chance to have,
Right.
Crosshair and the team hash it out.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
ultimately, that's kind of what we got. Because if you look
pretty
at the cast, there's 3 actors on this entire episode. D. Bradley
Yeah.
Baker doing his thing, and obviously he's great. Although I have one small critique for him later in this episode, but it's like it feels nitpicky, but I'm going to call it out anyway. So stay tuned for that. Obviously he's doing great with like a whole cast of clones here, and apparently I learned this. I was doing some Star Wars YouTubing. He does when he's reading the lines, he does all the characters on the page as in a row as they speak.
Oh,
so like
so he
so he'll,
doesn't
like,
do one by one.
No,
kind
he
of thing.
jumps back and forth between
Wow.
the characters as if they're in the room together.
Yeah.
And he has like
That's-
images of them, so because he finds that if he can see them, it helps him like.
That makes sense. Like
transition.
switch. Like okay. That is not how I would have pictured him doing that, but that's
Me too. I kind of
That's some
assumed he would do all of them at once. Like here, I'll do all the Rex ones and then all the Echo ones.
Yeah, and have someone like reading kind of lines with him almost.
Yeah.
But
And apparently his distinction between Rex and Echo, because they're both like standard clones,
regular clones.
is
yeah.
that Echo sounds grumpier. That's
okay.
that's his way he
Yeah.
like separates it out.
Rex has always sounded a little bit different from the other clones to me.
I feel like
but
it's really
Yeah,
hard to tell.
it
I
is
think
hard
it's
to
more
tell.
like the other clones are different from him. I think
Yeah,
is how
maybe.
it feels to me, but
that's true.
that's a
yeah.
distinction without a difference, maybe. Anyway, that is all to say that I really enjoyed it this episode. It's not like this is not going to be like an all-timer for me, mostly because I think that they still shortcut the audience in terms of the actual catharsis of having specifically Crosshair and Hunter, but
Right.
because it's only those two and Wrecker, who's I guess more open to it, is not really involved, it still feels a little hollow. So I'm hoping there's more work done on that front.
yeah.
The giant creature is, people make this joke all the time. When you start doing something enough that the show itself has to call it out as being like, oh, how many times are we going to deal with giant monsters?
Yeah.
That's not an excuse to keep using giant monsters. It doesn't help.
That's
It just makes it more obvious, and I feel like that like they kind of fell into that trap today.
Yeah.
Um,
They also used not that they've used giant worm
uh,
in this series, but they've used giant worms.
They have
before.
used giant worms, but that's only
Yeah.
because Star Wars is, influenced by Dune,
Of
right?
course,
So
yeah. There was a sandworm the last time.
right, which
that
is
we
much
saw.
more directly related to
Yeah.
to.
And I
to
guess
Dune,
it wasn't
obviously.
the Bad Batch. It was the other clone. It was Rex and
Still though.
the Wayward clones. But yeah.
Still though. Again, it's not to say that Dune has like owns the sandworm or giant worm concept, but like when you think of giant worms, I think most people think of Dune.
Right.
Anyway, that's my overall thoughts. I think the conceit of the episode of like trying to capture more intel makes sense. It feels like they were forced to include some type of action when I really feel like they didn't need to do that. And they could have just trusted that the audience could enjoy an episode without any action.
Right.
But they again kind of I feel like they need to because it's a kid's show or something. I don't know. So a little frustrated there.
Yeah.
What's your overall thoughts?
Not that I'm not going to say that they didn't need the action. I think from a writing point of view, it's easier to bring these guys kind of together faster if
they save each other's
survive.
lives.
Yeah, if they save each other's lives, if they narrowly miss getting eaten
It's
by a giant
true.
worm, it's a little bit easier to be like, oh, like
It's like,
here's some
see, I do trust you.
forgiveness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess, but like that's what I mean by a
I know
shortcut.
what you mean. It is, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. But I understand why, so that they didn't have to spend multiple episodes.
Sure, and it's like
But-
this is you could argue that these are soldiers, and the best way that they understand each
Right.
other is through action.
And this was like to me, this is low risk
Yes.
action. It wasn't, you can't have these guys fighting it out emotionally between each other on
If
like
they're-
a big mission.
Yeah,
It's got to be something smaller and more insignificant with less stakes. It
I agree.
can't be like the big infiltration mission that they're still fighting. There's got to be a little bit of work done beforehand.
I 100% agree with that. The smartest move they make here is not having any villain that can speak.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It forces them to deal with their own problems, internally. The worst thing they could have done was throw, Imperials at them right away.
Exactly.
And I think that would have been very tricky. I mean, you could argue that there's something interesting there, that there's something they could have done with that. But
Mhm.
as we said, like at the end of last week, they really needed to kind of like, especially the way that they ended the week before, last week, when there's no dialogue at all between Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair, and you're like, okay, well, what does that mean?
Mhm.
You have to answer that question. So, and they do a decent enough job, but again, I feel like they cheat us a little bit there too, because they skip forward what looks like a few days, or maybe a day or two, So
Right.
to me, it is a mixed bag.
Yeah.
But you know who doesn't think this is a mixed bag?
Who?
This IMDb reviewer who gave it a
Oh.
10 out of 10.
See, that surprises me. I thought this episode was going to get hurt a little bit more on IMDb.
Its average is only a 7.9.
Yeah, I was like, not that there's nothing, not to say there's nothing wrong with this episode. This one wasn't my favorite out of
Sure.
what we've seen so far. But
I will argue also that the decision to, I don't really argue, I'll just say that the decision to make this a spiritual sequel to The Outpost, which again, really top tier episode. All the
Mhm.
Crosshair episodes last season
they were very,
very good.
Yeah.
Solitary Clone being maybe my favorite, but The Outpost is such a good emotional episode for Crosshair. And obviously, it's the linchpin for him. Like, it's what changes everything.
Right.
And bringing the team back here for that like reckoning, I think is a smart choice.
Yeah.
So I like that.
I was gonna say I do really like that they come back here. I think it's important. Like you said, it's an important spot for Crosshair, and it brings up some more of those human emotions in him, I think. So.
Mhm.
And
So-
it reminds us of where he had that turn too.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's both emotionally resonant, but also like visually, it's a reminder of that too, which is good.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is again an IMDb review from Movie Turtle 2013.
Just loved it.
I know. I always love the names. The names are great.
Uh,
And again, there's only 3 reviews here. So if you want to be a featured review on IMDb, I encourage you to go and write a review. The chances are high you're going to be if you can write even like a coherent sentence, I think you're going to be okay.
Yeah,
There's some of them we read on here that like don't like the grammar is not great.
yeah.
Okay. So Crosshair's Return is what it's called, which again, the episode's called The Return, so I feel like again I'm losing a little faith already, but 10 out of 10. So they obviously loved it. This was more about the reintegration of Crosshair into the Bad Batch. Again, we talked about that. There's a lot of tension between him and Hunter, while Wrecker seems to be more content and just happy to go, happy the gang's back together, which is true. But again, he's also a thinking, feeling person, and I
Yeah.
think I would have liked to have seen more
Yeah.
of how he felt about things. For the most part, the episode tied together the redemption arc that Crosshair's been on since the last episode of Season 1. It solidifies his disillusionment with the Empire that was supposed to deliver on its promise of peace and stability, but failed. Well, it was a false promise. That was never really the promise. So he was able to see through the facade. Still, I feel Crosshair's development, much like the development of the other characters, is nowhere near finished. He still has to adjust and come to terms with his role in all of this. As for the others, Hunter too needs to learn about what exactly it was that made Crosshair leave the Bad Batch in the first place. It wasn't merely the source of different ideologies, but one of purpose. The Bad Batch, first and foremost, are soldiers, and what are soldiers without a military or government to utilize them properly? The others of the Bad Batch, especially Omega, seem to have figured this out about Crosshair. However, Hunter still thinks that, at least that's my impression, that's because they're a team of brothers. They stick together, not because they're a military unit established by the Republic that no longer exists, that has given them that purpose for their entire lives. That's a really long,
It is a
run-on
really
sentence.
long sentence.
Crosshair wants the stability a government can offer, and he doesn't find that. At least he initially didn't find that with the Bad Batch. In conclusion, this episode did a great job of getting this point across. I can't wait for the next one.
I feel like he didn't really talk about the episode.
We don't know. Maybe movie turtles a girl. We don't know that.
Sorry.
You know, or
They.
they them. We don't know. So we'll just say they for now.
Yeah. I was
Um,
like, they didn't really talk about the episode.
To be
I don't
fair, 4 people gave this review a thumbs down. So and said it was not helpful.
know. Yeah.
But 12 people did say it was helpful. And so I think what he's getting at here is that this episode continues to progress Crosshair's arc.
Yeah.
And one might argue that Crosshair is the most interesting character on the show right now
Mm-hmm.
because of this kind of, dichotomy between the Bad Batch and their kind of peaceful existence and his inability to kind of live in that world, which is a really tried and true story trope at this point. Think
Right.
things like American Sniper. It's a very popular movie. It has that same concept. Red Dead Redemption 2
Mhm.
deals with that same idea. There is a lot to mine out of the idea of a soldier not being able to reintegrate themselves.
Right.
But there's this kind of family dynamic here, which I think they're trying to touch on here. I think they lose the plot a little bit in that run-on sentence,
Yeah, a
but
little bit.
they're right to say that it's not done. There is more story to be told with Crosshair. Is there anything like what are you hoping? Where are you hoping Crosshair ends up? What's the best case scenario for him?
Best case scenario for him? I mean, it depends.
I guess those are 2 different questions.
Yeah. Again, we've said before that we don't see Crosshair necessarily surviving this
yeah.
whole,
Season.
season or story. But then again, I didn't really expect Tech to die, so maybe that is the only death we see in the
Well,
Bad Batch.
if you're
but-
looking for hints, remember that Tech was the only character getting character development for
yes,
most of
no,
last
I do
season,
remember, yeah.
and then he died.
And then
so
he died, yeah.
if Crosshair's now the one getting a lot of character development,
Yeah.
and we've talked about before, Hunter's hard because he's kind of a stereotype
Right.
character. So
Yeah.
and so is Wrecker to a certain degree, although I feel like you could do more there.
Right.
So they're kind of boxed in. Crosshair's the only one who has a personality
Mhm.
interesting enough to explore at this point.
It's true.
Again, I'm selling Hunter a little short there. There's stuff they could do. I feel like they've been content with, oh no, he is stoic and
Yeah.
does the right thing, but is maybe a little brash or whatever.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I want to see Crosshair sacrifice himself or die or whatever for his character.
But
like best case scenario for him, it's like
he
yeah,
retires.
he
Yeah.
reintegrates into the Bad Batch, and they all retire and live happily ever after on that island.
But I don't think I don't suspect that's going to happen. And you know what? You got to consider that Pabu is not where Rex retires, and you got to wonder why.
Mhm.
So I guess we'll see. But I think there's a very strong possibility that Crosshair. There's actually a strong possibility that none of these characters make it out of the season alive. So,
true.
All right, let's get into this recap. Before
Could you imagine
we do,
if they just kill them all? That would be kind of
that's
wild.
bold choice. I think that
But-
they can't do that.
Yeah.
Because that's not the type of stories that Star Wars tells typically. All right, before we get into the recap, just a quick reminder. Follow us on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast, Facebook.com/TowerBabbleCast, and head over to our website, TowerBabble.ca, to find everything that we do. In fact, I'm gonna make one more plea. So, of course, you can help support us on Patreon, patreon.com/TowerBabbleCast, where we do monthly film clubs. Last month, we did Dune Part 1, Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1, a great lead-in to Dune 2. So I'd recommend that. That's on the Patreon. In fact, that's actually public. We made that one public. That's on the feed. So you can listen to that. Jeremy and I talk about that. There's also a lot of Transformers discussion in there for some reason, but take that for what it is. Next month, we're doing Roadhouse. Or I guess this month.
Okay, I was just seeing this in the top corner. A new Roadhouse?
Yes, that's
or
why
the
there's
old
a new
Roadhouse?
Roadhouse.
So they redid Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yes, correct.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is why we're going to do the original.
Okay, we're
going to do the original.
Okay,
I can't say I want to see the new one until I've seen the old one.
Well,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a very long time since I've even seen Roadhouse.
Well, you're welcome to join for this one. We'll see.
Maybe I'll try.
Anyway, so that's you can support the show that way. But the other way you can support the show, leave a review, because sometimes people leave mean reviews. I got caught up in looking at our iTunes reviews, and someone left a particularly mean review like a couple months ago, and really bummed me out. So if you want to help perk me up specifically, go write us a nice review on whatever podcast player that you listen to us on. It would make a big difference.
I'm gonna go look up the review and bully.
I don't think you can. I don't know if there's any way to bully an iTunes user. I don't know how you would
bully them. I'm gonna find a way.
I feel like at one point there was like this like social media construct around iTunes, but it was like I think it was a massive failure. So,
who reviews things on iTunes anyway?
Well, I guess it's Apple Podcasts now.
Oh, Apple Podcast, whatever. Fine.
But it used to be iTunes.
Fair enough.
Okay, recap. So we start on Pabu. Omega wakes up in sunlight, which is obviously a stark contrast to the way that she was waking up in her cell on Tantus, on Wayland.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Still.
Yeah.
Odd choice.
Yeah. Wakes up in the sunlight. It's very super. It's just like the warmest. The idea of waking up in like a warm beam of sun, it just like fills my heart with joy. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
She's on the Marauder. She's got her Tuca doll back. She's basically in her old room. She gets up and she's greeted by Wrecker and Hunter. They're drinking Calf, which is the Star Wars equivalent of coffee, or at least it seems like that's probably what they're drinking. They're standing in that way where like you're holding a cup of coffee, you know. So I just anyway. Then I don't know what they're doing. I think they're just waiting for her to wake up, probably because it's been so long. It's unclear how much time has passed, but she's got a new outfit already. In fact, according to StarWars.com, she's gotten 2 new outfits. In fact, and we do know that because she's got like a winter outfit and her new like knitted fleece.
Yeah, that's a very cute little vest.
Yeah,
Vest.
it's a cool outfit. You don't really see vests like that in Star Wars very often, so I like that. And then her winter outfit, which is pretty cool, with like a helmet that's like very similar to what you'd see in like a rebel base.
Yes, yeah.
So anyway, she's awake. She's got her new knitted vest on. She's curious where Crosshair is, and Hunter said that he's still adjusting. Take that for what it's worth. He's not around. So she goes to check on him. That's the first thing that comes to mind. It's nice to think that the first thing that she's worried about is Crosshair doing okay?
Yeah.
Right? She's never thinks of herself first. This is probably like the first line on the character Bible at Lucasfilm, which is selfless. Mm-hmm. It turns out that Crosshair AZ, we haven't seen AZ in a long time.
Yeah, did not know he was still around.
Forgot
to
he
be
was living on
honest.
Pabu.
Yeah.
And Batcher are doing some target practice because, he's a sniper, so he's got to do some target practice. Shep and Liana, who we don't see but are named in this episode, you'll recall them from the Pabu episode last season, like the mayor of the little town,
Right.
brought him some food, and she, being Omega, accuses Crosshair of hiding from Hunter. Right, so this is where the crux of the episode is, which is, hey, Crosshair, you need to come to terms with Hunter. That's
Right.
the log line of this episode is tensions rise as heroes navigate new dynamics on a dangerous mission. But you could just erase that and say Hunter needs to come to terms with Crosshair's return, and that would be
Right.
also accurate.
Yeah, I get the feeling here that they're kind of trying to tell us, like, yeah, it's been a couple days, but they haven't talked much. Like, it's Crosshair is kind of still doing his own thing, going off on his own, not
Right.
really hanging around the guys.
But they gave his
so-
his rifle back.
Yeah.
So
and
they
his
yeah.
no, or was that the last episode that they gave him his uniform back?
No, his armor comes in this. They get it
okay.
back in this one.
Right.
But she says like, "Oh, they don't trust me," but they trusted you enough to give you your gun back. So
Yeah.
Anyway, he's continuing to do with his like shaky hand thing. The series doesn't seem to be interested in exploring what exactly is causing that, at least not yet. Is it like a like a traditional PTSD type response,
Right.
or is it caused by that brain thing that he had
Getting
going on
shocked,
last?
yeah.
Or
Mhm.
whatever. Ultimately, I think maybe their show's more interested in not exploring that because it's more it's easier if it's ambiguous to just say,
Yeah,
as a sniper, if his hand is shaking, that creates an interesting character dynamic.
definitely, yeah.
Anyway, his accuracy is not great, as AZ reveals he was only 53%. Although you got to admit, I know you can put a droid back together, but the idea of like hovering out there and just holding a fruit
Yeah.
is so funny. And like looks like he's like dodging it a little bit.
Yeah, he's kind of like
But
skirting around a little
It's
bit, but
very
I just love the tone AZ uses too. Like, it's like kind of matter of fact, but it's also kind of taunting a little bit.
I feel like it was more like he thought he was doing him a favor.
yeah.
Hey, hey, congrats! I calculated your accuracy 53%, and
Yeah.
he's like, ugh.
He's just like annoying.
Yeah. So she continues to press Crosshair on like, hey, you need to talk with Hunter. But she's kind of picks up on that he's not in the mood. So she decides to change up the conversation and asks like, what's the deal? Like, what do you need to do to be a sniper? So he's like, well, it's more than just good sight. You got to have patience. You got to be able to read the environment and know when you have eyes on you. And he like glares over his shoulder, and Hunter and Wrecker are just
Up on the cliff.
conspicuously up on the cliff, just
Yeah.
sitting there like watching them in a like kind of in a way that makes it feel like they're being helicopter parents a little
Yeah.
bit, and so they're up there, they give a little wave. Hunter and Wrecker quickly discuss giving Crosshair his rifle back. They're concerned that maybe it was a bad idea. Seems a little late to be having that conversation, but
Yeah.
whatever. That's when a ship flies overhead. It's Echo's ship. They're going to go see him and chat it up. Before we do, quick question for you.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on this opening sequence, resetting on Pabu, Hunter mistrusting, Crosshair feeling like he can't be trusted, all those things? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, I think those are all important things that we need to establish and see because we didn't get into it last episode. So
Right.
like obviously these feelings are going to be there and we gotta show them. I also just liked kind of like how you said getting to see Omega like sleep in because
Mhm.
she's been in just a crappy prison for so long.
You got to
and
imagine the
she's-
hours aren't great. The work hours,
yeah,
you got to
of
think they're like you're looking
course.
like 12, 13 hours a
So,
day.
Yeah, it's just nice to see her back home with her
Yeah, being a
with her
kid again.
boys and just getting to like snooze with her doll and like it's very sweet. But yeah, I mean, like I said, these are important things to show us so that we can kind of move forward that there is this tension and we
Right.
got to work through it. So
Yeah, and again, my opinion is that they could have handled all this a little bit better. I think you're right that all this needed to be done. I just don't know if they did it in the best way
Yeah, fair
possible, but it's maybe nitpicky. Okay, so Echo arrives and gives Omega a big hug. Crosshair makes a sly remark about what, no hug for me. But
Yeah.
Echo is all business, and he's like, as long as his intel's good, they'll get along,
Yeah.
right? I mean, as soldiers, they're pretty used to working with characters of like
Oh yeah.
questionable repute,
Yeah,
one might say. So
100%.
it's like, Crosshair's back. So far as Echo's concerned, it's like that's all he needs to know. Like he doesn't need
Yeah.
the emotional catharsis that the others do.
Yeah. Echo's always been very to the point.
Pragmatic,
Yeah, and like I don't know, he's also been through a lot worse. So I think
Yeah,
in his
that's
brain, he's
true.
like, yeah, these are small peanuts, guys. Like
Right.
just
Work it out.
Yeah. He's like, they'll figure it out.
Kill each
right?
other later.
Yeah.
Okay, so the ship itself is the Remora, which
Ooh, good name.
I love it. It
Mhm.
is a good name. It's also a fish, I believe.
Oh, interesting.
Remora. I'm not sure about that. Pretty sure.
Did you just make that up? Or do you know
you
that?
know what? It's a fish. A transport from Rex's group, first seen in season 2, Tipping Point. This is from StarWars.com. The Remora was once a mining vessel that has since been retrofitted for high-speed insertion and extraction missions, equipped with a small, detachable boarding craft, also known as a leech vessel, capable of docking with other ships and even boring into solid material, making it ideal for stealth infiltration.
That's cool.
Yeah, very cool. It's a cool design ship. I like the whole look of it. It's got kind of like a hammerhead look, but also kind of looks a little bit like the Falcon, but also looks like a Venator, but smaller. It's cool. All right, so cut to later that evening. They're eating dinner at that same dinner. Is that their house? It's unclear.
I guess it's their spot.
But don't they live on their ship?
They got a summer house there.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. It's their their cabin.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're eating dinner. They've got the same old vegetables and fruit out there as they typically do, and they've got nice wooden cups. It's very wholesome. Omega is explaining about Tantus and reveals more about Emery, kind of saying, like, well, who's Emery? Well, she's a clone like us, like me. She feels, I think, a slightly different attachment to Emery as another female clone.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a lot of questions about why Emery has a last name, but I don't know if the show's interested in talking about that. But maybe it is. We'll find out later.
Emery has a last name?
Yeah, it's Dr. Emery something. Remember?
I did not realize that, or I didn't catch that.
Here's a question.
Okay.
So Michelle Ang,
Yes.
there's a picture of her here. She plays Omega. Do you feel like she has the look to play an older Omega in live action if she had to? Or did it need to be recast?
It's hard because she, not that she needed to have blonde hair, but it's hard because she does have such dark hair. But I'm assuming she's like Kiwi, right? Like that's
Yeah. Well, yeah, because that's the only reason she has a true Kiwi accent and not.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, are we supposed to believe that Jango Fett is blonde?
That Jango. Yeah, that's that weird thing that they do with the clones. Like, why is Rex blonde, but some of the other ones aren't?
Yeah.
And why is Omega blonde? It's
I don't know. Maybe it's a cloning thing.
They get Star Wars is a little
inconsistent.
Yeah, and a little. We've kind of talked about before about how some of the clones aren't really, their skin tone should be. It
should be a little bit darker. Yeah,
it very much should be.
Yeah. They did actually darken them, I think, a little bit over time.
Yeah, I think they are kind of like, Omega looks a little more like tanned and stuff. But yeah, it's. I mean, I think she has the face like Michelle Ang. I think the face would be fine. But yeah, it'd just be so hard to not see her with blonde hair. But yeah.
But wigs exist.
Yeah. I think it could work.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
And like hearing her speak, obviously she's not really putting on a voice, so it's
right.
like it just sounds like Omega talking out of someone who looks kind of like an older Omega.
Yeah,
so I think it could work. Which seems to be like their new go-to like casting.
Right. Yeah, is using the actual
it's like
voice
we're gonna
actors,
if we're gonna cast somebody in a video game or in whatever, if we want to use them in real life. If they're playing a human character, then
like Cal Kestis, like
exactly.
making him actually look, like the voice actor.
Exactly. All right. So, and they're kind of like, it's tough because obviously there's no female. Like, what does a female version of Tamora Morrison look like?
Well, that's the thing too. It's like she's a clone, but not. Again, we talked about.
Yeah, they have the freedom. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that work? But you can't just put like long hair on a Jango Fett face.
Exactly.
You know, so yeah.
Okay, so cut to later that evening. They're eating dinner. They're talking about Tantus. Crosshair doesn't have much to say. He says, "Oh, I was a prisoner." This makes Hunter, like, I think, a little even more distrustful of him. It's like, well, you were there with her. She's got all this intel, and you got nothing.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like, so.
Like, yeah, what are you holding? You're not giving us anything. Yeah.
Right, and so I think he's not doing himself any favors there because obviously he does have information to share. So Echo says that they've been looking for a while for Tantus, which I feels like that seems new to me. Like looking for, were they looking for it because Omega was there, or was that from before then, or like how does that all work? So it's unclear to me. How do they even know it existed?
Right.
You know, they have Nalase's data pad still, but it's offline. So it's like I like this because from a technology standpoint, it's kind of like a mainframe endpoint scenario. So it's like unless it's connected to the mainframe, it doesn't have the access to the information. Or in this case, it's encrypted.
Right.
And they have no way of breaking the encryption, and that's when they're reminded that Tech's not with them anymore.
No, yeah.
I first of all, did Crosshair know that Tech died?
He must, I guess.
Did they like quickly address that? Like, hey, just if you're wondering where Tech is, he's not here.
Well, I mean, Omega spent a lot of time talking to him.
Yeah, I guess too. And so
So-
she would have known.
Yeah.
But it's never explicitly addressed like,
No.
hey, as Crosshair had a relationship with Tech
Mhm.
and now he's gone and I
gone,
feel
yeah.
X about it.
Yeah.
So, little odd there. And also the reference to Tech is so fast.
Mhm.
And I understand we only have 27 minutes, so we had to move pretty quick, but you could have cut a little bit of the ice worm thing and we would have had
Yeah.
lots of time for this.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just feel like they don't handle loss well, or they're not able to touch on it because again, maybe they feel it's too serious of a theme. I don't know.
I mean, maybe. And you're right. Like, they could have spent a touch more time maybe talking about this or having Crosshair have an opinion.
Yeah,
Not an
I
opinion,
wanted to
but,
hear
like,
his opinion on like
hear him say something
anything.
about it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because it would be nice to kind of hear what he has to say about that. But
maybe next week.
Yeah.
Luckily, Crosshair actually does have some information, and he reveals that plugging the datapad into an Imperial console will bypass the encryption. He suggests infiltrating a remote facility that he has experience with. He seems shy to volunteer more information, or even that information, and he kind of has this like little like puppy dog face that he makes.
yeah.
And like Hunter is still like kind of like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
So Hunter's first reaction is split up the team, right? He wants Omega and Wrecker to stay behind, but Omega is not having it and convinces him that she needs to join them. She's like, we're just back and you want to split us up? That feels like commentary on the show itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit of meta commentary.
Yeah.
Because I think she's right. I mean, it's like that wouldn't feel satisfying.
No.
So, and her response here, her excuse is that she feels responsible for leaving those clones behind, which she shouldn't.
No.
Because that's not her responsibility. But she wants to do her part to try to rescue them. So she wants to be involved. Do you disagree with that sentiment?
No, I think it's right. It's at some point they gotta just stop splitting up, stop leaving her back. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and especially Hunter does make the thing like, oh, we don't need to get captured again. It's like it's probably better for you to just keep her with you.
Yeah, if you don't want her to be captured, just
honestly,
keep her next to you.
Like-
Isn't the reason that she got captured because she was at Sid's bar and you were out somewhere else?
Yeah,
at the time?
like everything got split up and exactly. So it just makes more sense to kind of keep the group together
Sure.
going forward.
And I don't disagree. So it's nighttime now, and they're loading up Echo's ship with equipment for the mission. Crosshair comforts her as Hunter is still kind of giving them the stink eye about like being forced to bring her along, and he's just like, "Don't worry, he's just worried about you," which is it makes sense. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious by the like everything that
Of
you talked
course.
about there. It's weird to hear Crosshair say that, to be honest, but what's nice here is that they're maintaining the kind of unique relationship that Crosshair and Omega have.
And I like that. I do like that he has a person in the Bad Batch here, and that they spend a little, that time like checking in on each other, and
it's probably the
it's
most important thing
yeah.
for him to reintegrate. To be honest,
Absolutely,
is to
yeah,
have like
yeah.
a person who can guide you or to you can lean on.
Yeah. exactly. If all of them were like, "Fuck you, Crosshair,"
Right.
it's like he wouldn't still be there.
He would not react
so.
well to that. That's
No.
not how he. He doesn't behave that way.
No.
So she wonders if he thinks that Crosshair agrees with Hunter that she should stay behind. He seems to kind of think so, saying that despite her being quite quote unquote capable, that she's still quote unquote just a kid.
Yeah.
This is their first opportunity to remind us and to remind the audience and him that she's technically older than him.
Yeah.
And calls him little brother.
Little brother, yeah. Very cute.
Which,
I
by the
love
way,
that.
yeah, it's so cute and so funny because we even get a smile out
Yeah.
of Crosshair.
Uh-huh.
And we get a really melancholy version of Crosshair's theme. And it's on Screen Crush, they were talking about it as they're calling it a leitmotif, which is much more of a musical term that I'm not as familiar with, but I think that is correct, that it's not technically a theme. I think it's a whole song, but a leitmotif is just like a specific series of notes. Let's look up what leitmotif means. So I don't sound
it
like
probably has to do with how long it is. Yeah.
leitmotif music. It's spelt very different than I thought it was. Leitmotif. A leitmotif or leitmotiv is a short, recurring musical phrase associated with a particular person, place, or idea. It is closely related to the musical concepts of idée fixe or motto thème. The theme, the spelling leitmotif is an anglicization of the German leitmotiv, literally meaning leaning motif or guiding motif. So, it is something we've talked about before. I mean, we hear both Omega's leitmotif as well as Crosshair's leitmotif in like succession here because they're like joining, they're having a moment, and it's very cute. And it's nice to see him smile, which I don't think we may have never seen before.
Yeah, pretty much, eh? Yeah, and it's nice that she can kind of get that out of him. She just kind of has a way with these guys, right? It doesn't matter, Wrecker's this big kind of bumbling gruff guy, but he's just like a softie with her.
Exactly.
And it's nice that she just like, I don't know, you do with siblings, right?
Speak for yourself.
Well, I mean, I got older brothers.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of how you are. Not that they're necessarily her older brothers, as we just talked about. But
yeah, but I mean, it's
different when you've got like those like protector sibling kind of relationships. But
being reminded that she's older than them, I feel like is meaningless in this show because it's like the dynamics of these characters are obvious, right? Like Hunter's the father figure,
yes, yeah,
and like Wrecker's the older brother,
yeah,
and Crosshair's like kind of like the
he's like the black sheep
of the family, yeah. Exactly. So, it just I don't think it's it's fine to remind us that it's fine unless they're going to do something with it. It doesn't have to be brought up very often, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what you would do with that information because she doesn't have like the emotional maturity. You could argue that she has the emotional maturity, but she doesn't have like any other types of maturity that gives her the ability to be like, I am older than you and I have this additional wisdom and therefore X.
It's also like the life experience. Like these guys were made to be soldiers. They were soldiers. She was never a soldier. And she's, aging the way a normal kid does.
Right.
So it's, yeah.
Exactly. And
I
would prefer, if we're going to deal with that concept, I'd like them to deal with the idea of the clones coming to terms with the fact that they don't age at a regular rate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean for them? And what does that mean for like how does someone like Omega deal with that? We don't again, I don't know if the show's interested in doing that kind of stuff, but
probably not.
It would be interesting for them.
They're like, that's too complicated.
Yeah, but the whole subplot of the show is the clones. So don't be shy to explore these ideas. I'd be happy to read a book that explores these concepts more.
Yeah.
So a Bad Batch novel would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so just at that moment, Wrecker arrives with a box containing Crosshair's old armor. And he said, quote, "It never felt right to get rid of it," which is a nice kind of like, I'm not going to say that we were saving it for you, but we were saving it for you.
Yeah. He's like, I kept it. It's whatever. We put it in a box. It's fine. Yeah.
And Crosshair and Hunter then share a look. This is like the beginning of where, not even the beginning, because at the very beginning of the episode, he's like following him around. But
Right.
this whole episode, Hunter spends half the episode or more shadowing, as he says, as Crosshair calls it, Crosshair.
Yeah.
And not saying anything, just like giving him like weird looks
Side
and
eye.
stuff.
Yeah.
So this is like one of
Yeah.
those moments where he's like, hey, he got his armor back. How does he react to that? He's like
Mhm.
clocking all these things, trying to like read him. And I don't think Crosshair is a character that's easy to read,
No,
you know?
definitely not. It is kind of cool too, though, because we get to see like the old paint job on the armor
Yes.
again too, which
Yeah.
is like which I like.
Do you think he's going to update his paint?
I don't know.
I think
Is
they
he gonna
have
paint
to.
his like the other dudes?
I
think that'd be weird if he was just like, oh,
He's like, here's me
I'm just
in
gonna paint
blue.
mine like you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or like, hey, what, do you guys have any of that paint left over?
yeah, right. Maybe they all do a new paint job together.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah,
But then what happens when Tech comes back?
yeah, yeah. When Tech, that's why they don't.
When
That's why
Tech
they
comes-
don't talk about Tech's death because he's
right,
maybe
because
not
he's
dead.
coming back. Right,
Yeah.
right.
You never know.
He's in a tank with his hands cut off, just like Echo's.
Yeah. Jeez. So morbid.
Okay. Cut to space. We're over Barton 4. This is the planet from the Outpost, the icy, snowy planet that Hunter shoots that Imperial officer on.
Mm-hmm.
So we cut to Echo's ship popping out of hyperspace over an icy planet. The icy planet of Barton 4, this is from StarWars.com, is home to an Imperial outpost, but little else. On the desolate planet, the elements and natural predators conspire to eliminate the soldiers guarding the depot, while local raiders will stop at nothing to claim supplies and other cargo for themselves. When the outpost is left abandoned and forgotten, the depot drains the last of its resources, keeping the perimeter beacons powered up. On the ship approaching the planet, they are picking up quote-unquote minimal life signs. Once they land, they also aren't picking up any heat signatures or comms, and as Echo puts it, there's no one here, which was a relief to me from a episode construction perspective, as we talked about earlier. Just better
Yeah.
to not deal with Imperials
Yeah.
right now.
I agree.
As they disembark, we see two things. I was relieved that there was no Imperials, but as soon as there's quote-unquote nothing here,
Yeah.
I start the tension starts to go up for me, and then the
Of
episode
course.
plays into that too,
Of
which is
course.
fun.
Yeah.
As we disembark, we see that Batcher is with them, but the real reveal is when Crosshair emerges in his old armor. His theme or his leitmotif plays again, but this time it's much more heroic.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of some horn in there, some brass, and Wrecker has, "Hey, it does fit," which is a funny line. And he's like pulling the collar. It's like, eee.
Yeah.
That old armor is pretty cool.
It is.
But I
yeah.
gotta admit, I liked the black on black with the green visor that he had with the Imperial armor.
Oh,
I
with
thought
the
that was
Imperial-
pretty
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, it's true.
So as he steps out, we see the same bird that was kind of like haunting him when he was in the outpost, flying overhead, and StarWars.com calls it a black ice vulture.
Right.
And for me, it kind of serves a similar purpose to Ahsoka's Owl Morai.
Oh, yeah.
In only that it kind of has, there's more to it than there just being a bird, right?
Right,
It has a thematic reason. Although Morai is also there's more to it than that
Yes.
there as well. But
Yes.
yeah.
I also like that it's a vulture because vultures are very, they signify death and sorrow, and they're not nice birds.
right, but they also can fly and represent freedom as a bird.
Yes, of course. But it's just interesting choice that we just feel like Crosshair is just connected to this vulture.
Yeah,
right?
it's sharp and has sharp
Mhm.
edges and has
Yeah.
it's a little prickly, kind of
Mhm.
like Crosshair is.
Yeah.
And so the way that
Like it, yeah.
StarWars.com describes it is the brilliant blues of the black ice vulture's plumage helps the creature blend in on Barton 4. With sharp beaks and razor-like talons, the vultures are silent sentinels,
Oh.
circling the skies and awaiting their next meal.
They do look much prettier than the vultures we have here.
Yeah, they might be the ugliest bird in the world.
Yeah, they're not nice looking.
Yeah.
Ice vulture's pretty
The
cool
naked neck thing is like really a turnoff.
It's the naked head,
Yeah.
neck. Yeah, it's quite. Yeah, it's like, why don't you have any feathers on your head?
Yeah,
It's weird.
I don't know. Anyway, Hunter this is where he starts getting more like vocally annoyed. Hunter's annoyed that the base is abandoned. He's seemingly blaming Crosshair for bad intel. even though he obviously retorts that he wasn't getting regular updates while he was a prisoner in Tantus.
Yeah.
Right.
Guess what? When he leaves, he's a prisoner.
Well, when he leaves,
And-
he his last act is to shoot that guy, and he's
Right.
arrested.
Yes.
Right. So
But
Yeah.
even when that's all happening, they're already leaving.
loading up. Yeah.
Up. But they weren't leaving much behind from what I remember. They
It's
were going to
true.
leave like a small group or something, but yeah, or I guess he just didn't know what they were leaving.
Yeah, he
behind.
doesn't like he doesn't. He probably wasn't given
Yeah.
a lot of information there, right? And this is kind of just like an Hunter lashing out,
Of course,
right?
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
you're not giving me anything, like like what's
Yeah.
going on here, right? He's not convinced that everything is as straightforward as Crosshair is saying. That he's suggesting that there's more to it than he's letting on, which hint
Right.
there is. So some good intuition on Hunter's part there. Batcher interrupts them as she seems to sense something, but Hunter spots what appears to be an Imperial sensor beacon, putting off a high-frequency tone, which is and explains it away that way. But I think it's nice because it just plays off of our understanding of actual dogs and their ability to hear higher-pitched sounds.
Yes, yeah.
Have you ever used a dog whistle before?
No.
Neither have I. And the idea of it is being silent, but all the dogs going like, "Whoop,"
Yeah.
is fun to me. I don't.
Well, haven't you ever played those? It's like it has a tone, and
Until you can't hear it
until
anymore.
you can't hear it anymore, and like there's different. If you have different people in the room, like different people, it'll cut out for them at different times. It's
Right.
quite funny.
It's
Like,
depressing,
see
and I
how
don't want to
good
do
you're
that.
hearing. Yeah, to like where you're hearing is. Mine's usually pretty like
Well,
on
it
point
goes-
for my age of like where it's
Right.
supposed to cut out. I'm like,
It-
oh, okay.
It gets worse as you age, I guess,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
There is a movie, I think it's Children of Men, where someone says something about like that ringing in your ears. That's the sound of that part of your eardrums dying, and you'll never be able to hear that tone again.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't know if that's true,
No.
but it's like so. It was like that stuck with me for so long because it's like so depressing. To
I
think about.
understand like the theory behind that. Like if you have a really harsh, sharp tone, like it'll mess up your hearing.
Right.
But it's you're gonna need to listen to it more than once for it to
Right,
just like
okay.
completely demolish your.
That's good to know. I'm glad I'm like it's because the idea that there's sounds that are happening in the world that you just can't hear anymore.
It's weird. Yeah.
It's depressing.
It is
to think
weird.
about.
Mhm.
It's melancholy. So, anyway, Batcher, he senses the stuff. Crosshair says that the beacons are there to keep out local raiders, which, to be honest, never really made sense. It's like, how does a
No.
beacon keep anybody out? Unless it's a sensor, like I guess they call them sensor beacons, but in this case, they're also putting out sound. So it's again, they're kind of feeling like they're retconning this a little bit to make
Yeah.
it fit
Yeah.
from last season. Hunter, upset again, asks why he didn't say anything about the sensors, and Crosshair tells him that the local raiders were quote unquote dealt with.
Right.
And this starts a whole new argument about how, oh yeah, how? He's like, oh, just take a guess.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, yeah, just following orders, which, it's nice of them to keep using that same
Right.
idea. And it's interesting to hear Hunter say that because I've never really heard them grapple with that concept,
Right.
really.
Right. Well, it is just very much like a throwing it in his face.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
It's an insult at that point.
Yes.
And it's supposed to be.
Yeah, he's
So-
going for hurting him, and he's
Yeah.
succeeding.
Yeah.
Crosshair only makes this worse because, of course, he's being insulted. So he suggests that Hunter is scared. He's like, "Well, if you're scared, then you can just stay in the ship."
Stay in the ship. Yeah.
Echo breaks them up, reminding them that they're on a mission and they're there for a purpose. Right? Kill yourselves later.
Yeah.
Omega. I don't know why I keep wanting to say that in the D. Bradley Baker voice. Omega scolds Crosshair, and he says, like, "Listen, I told you to talk to him, not argue with him." And then I love,
Yeah.
again, this kind of like older brother sister situation where he's like, well, he started it.
Yeah.
This is funny, right?
Yeah.
He started it. That's my Crosshair. Is that okay? It's not bad.
It's all right. Yeah.
Did it sound more like tech? They head into the base, which needs to be dug out from the snow, and Batcher helps with the digging, which is fun.
Love it.
Serves a purpose there. We get an ominous shot of the sensor again, and I thought, that's not a good sign. And that's when my the tension started to really go up for me.
Yes,
It's like
yeah.
it's quiet, too quiet.
Yeah. obviously there's a big monster coming.
Yeah, I didn't expect the big monster, to be honest. I wasn't sure what was going to happen.
I kind of assumed it was going to be something. I wasn't expecting an ice worm, but I was definitely thinking like some kind of big, angry.
For me, it's a little
monster.
frustrating because 2 episodes ago we just had a big monster, or 3 episodes ago.
Did
Which
we?
I guess, yeah, that was like the whole like tentacle slither vine.
Oh, the slither vines. Yeah, that's true.
Just
yeah,
feels too
you're
soon.
Right. Yeah, too soon for an ice worm.
Right.
I mean, I feel like anytime you're using this like high frequency thing, there's always some kind of big bad monster that
That doesn't like the
frequency.
sound.
and,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we see it
yeah.
like a few times in Star Wars, right? Like with in Rebels with the creepy big
Oh,
creepy spiders.
I hate those things. Oh.
But it's like, oh, okay, well, in the Star Wars world, as long as you have like a really annoying high pitched sound,
It
you
keeps the
can-
monsters
you can
away.
Keep the monsters away. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also true for mice.
Is it?
Yes, you can get these little things that put out a tone that you can't hear, but mice can, that they don't like.
Oh.
I don't know how effective they are,
Yeah.
to be honest. So anyway, they get into the base, and they spot a working console. Omega gets to work assessing the power situation. I love how she's like the first one, and she has to like push a chair in front of it to like stand on.
Yeah.
Read the thing. It's funny. She says that most of the power is gone, as the beacons have used most of it. They transfer power to the depot instead, obviously turning off the beacons. Wrecker asks Crosshair why the Empire abandoned the base, and Crosshair ultimately doesn't know, but suggests that, quote, it served its purpose, which is a
Right.
callback to Lieutenant Nolan's line, that real piece of shit from The Outpost.
Mhm.
And Hunter says, that sounds familiar, but what do you think he's getting at there? Like, is that something he feels like he's heard from the Empire before, or something he feels like?
Yeah, I don't actually know.
I think he's just
You
like,
caught
again, I
me
think
on
he's
that
just like,
one,
I think
but
he's lashing out for
I
the
think
sake
it's
of
just
lashing
for
out.
yeah, it's yeah.
I don't know. If you have a good idea, let us know.
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
Just like
happy to listen.
typical Empire stuff that you just used to listen
Right.
to all the time, Crosshair. I
That's
don't
right.
know.
Without a response to Hunter, he's like not even going to dignify him with a
Yeah.
response. Crosshair walks further into the base and finds Mayday's clone helmet abandoned on the ground, along with a few other clone helmets.
Yeah.
Once again, calling back to the Outpost, because if you remember in that episode, they're losing men, and they're like enshrining them with their helmets in like kind of like this makeshift grave situation.
Mhm.
And so he sets them up on nearby crates, and Hunter watches this. And I think this is probably the first moment where Hunter's like, okay, this isn't like, he's doing some weird stuff here, but it's not necessarily bad.
Right,
right?
yeah. I think he's cluing in on like, okay, maybe a little bit more did happen here.
Right.
Like things, yeah.
Well,
Maybe
that's
I
why
should lighten up a little bit.
Well, he doesn't really
No.
though. And like, it's cool to see them go straight to the helmet of Mayday's specific helmet, which you can tell
Yes.
because it has the wrappings around it.
Mhm.
I don't think anyone had the expectation that Mayday was going to live. I mean, he was basically
No.
dead at the end of the Outpost, and
Yeah.
the Empire wasn't about to help him. Nice of them to leave his helmet behind, though. So
Yeah.
we knew. Sad though, because he was one of the kind of the cooler clones that we've met over the years. So what do you think? You think Crosshair's just having like a little bit of like a moment here? What things going through his head?
I mean, I think because also the helmet's just on the ground, I think it's a little bit of like a respect thing for him
Sure.
too. Like that was his buddy for whatever time, and
Right.
that death I think really like
Affected
started that
him, yeah.
affected him, started that more disillusionment with the Empire.
He
and
goes
then, yeah,
through an
it's-
odyssey in that episode.
Yeah,
And
like it's
he's never connected with regular clones.
no
right?
no,
And this one he does, and he risks his life to save,
yeah,
and then is rejected essentially by the Empire.
exactly. They just won't even
yeah.
help the guy in the last moments there, right?
Yeah.
So I think there just is so much meaning to that helmet in particular to Crosshair.
Yes.
So I think it's just the symbolicism, I guess, of picking it up off the ground and like
Yes.
putting it, giving it a little bit more respect because it deserved more respect.
Right.
That Mayday deserved more respect
because he
than
gave
it's-
him respect.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's
It's-
interesting. I feel like the episode doesn't really linger on it, but
no,
you
but
know,
it's nice to
yeah.
see that bit of like humility in
Yeah.
in Crosshair because you don't get to see things that affect him emotionally as often.
yeah, and I also like picking up on this thread. I just feel like the show, like generally Star Wars is introducing new things a lot. I mean, obviously there's the prequels and all those stuff. We go back all the time, and
right.
connect things all the time. But this is one of those moments where it's like no one ever goes back and like looks at Padme's grave at any point.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's like this is an opportunity to reflect on loss in a different way, and I think it's a nice callback and connection to that. Okay, so once Omega transfers the power to the depot, we get this really ominous shot of the sensor beacon, and you hear like a low rumbling. The tension really starts picking up here, and I love what they do, where they start to pull the camera in very slowly, and that's just a simple move that you can do to increase tension, and it's cool seeing them use these kind of more mature, I would say, cinematography decisions,
Right.
because it's not a real camera.
No, it's
right?
not. It's
So-
animation, so it is. Yeah, you're right. It is neat to see something that you would
This is a
use
filmmaking
in live action.
Yeah, this is a filmmaking conceit that you would use in live action,
Mhm.
but they use it in animation because it's still
Mhm.
effective.
Yeah.
Okay. So Echo plugs in the data pad into the console, and we learn that Tantus has quote unquote even more clone prisoners than we thought. And that's not surprising. I think we knew that there was a lot of them already.
Of course.
But
yeah.
what's disappointing is that apparently that's all we get to learn. So
Mhm.
yeah, it is what it is. Another shot of the sensor beacon, and this time Batcher is starting to sense stuff. Right? So he's getting his echoes up. Crosshair leaves to quote unquote check the perimeter. He's kind of, I think, tired of Hunter following him around, but Hunter follows him anyway. Echo, meanwhile, coaches Omega to let them go so they can work it out on their own. This is like, I feel like this is classic clone stuff. Let them figure it out.
Yeah.
And anyway, they need to finish the data transfer, so they have work to do. So meanwhile, Crosshair, he's taking in another look at that black ice vulture, sitting patiently. We get the first good look at it here. It's pretty cool looking. Before it takes off again. Ultimately, it's just waiting for one of them to die, which is a fun concept.
Yeah.
Crosshair is annoyed that Hunter keeps following him around, shadowing him, as it were. Things start to finally come to a head, though, as Hunter presses Crosshair for answers. He wants to know how he ended up being imprisoned by the Empire after working for them for so long.
Right.
Did you portray them like you did us, quote unquote? I think it's an interesting question because I think it reveals more about Hunter than it does about what he's actually concerned about, which is, I'm upset with you because you betrayed us, not because you worked for the Empire.
Right.
Because, as we said, they've worked with shady people before. It's because we trusted you and you broke that trust.
Right.
Right? He doesn't really care if he betrayed the Empire. Why would he care about that?
No.
Right? Unless what he wants to know is like, do you have any allegiance at all?
Right.
And that's maybe fair, but again, that's not how he asked it. So the shots of the sensor beacon continue to push in, and the rumbling sound is getting even louder. But back inside, quickly, we learn that the datapad doesn't have any base schematics. It is really just medical records, and it's all we're gonna get, as Echo says.
Mhm.
But better than nothing, I guess. You can, there's some clues in there that they can work out, and I'm sure they'll say, "Hey, we learned XYZ from this," and it's
Right.
gonna lead
Yeah.
us somewhere. Batcher continues to act strangely, and Omega is noticing this now and is getting worried. Back outside, Hunter keeps pressing Crosshair for more. What changed? You thought we'd take you back and not ask any questions? I don't think so. Tell me what changed. What happened, Crosshair? And he gives him a shove.
Mhm.
So it's like, now it's getting physical. It's like, enough is enough. You need to come straight,
Right.
Crosshair, as his now, again, melancholy leitmotif plays, reveals that he killed an Imperial officer. He says, I did betray them after they betrayed me. Which I think, I don't know, how do you read that? What do you think that line here is hinting at?
See, I kind of wish they could get a little bit more in depth, because to me that's too simple, and that's too much of a, I don't know, more of like a selfish way of putting it.
Sure.
When to me that's not exactly what happened. It's like, it's not that Crosshair got betrayed, but there was more human reasons to that.
Yeah, well,
right?
it's
like
like-
it was deeper than that. It
Yeah.
wasn't just that they screwed you over. It was that they let your friend die at your feet
Right.
and didn't care. And it's like, that's a much more important reason to like
Yes, but
leave
he
the
but
Empire or to betray the
Crosshair
Empire.
is not
but
that. He's not vulnerable enough
No,
to be
he's
able to
not.
reveal that type of information.
he's not.
You know?
But I just feel like it would mean more to Hunter to know
Sure.
exactly what happened than to be like, yeah, I betrayed them after they betrayed me. Just sounds like,
But
yeah.
it
but
feels like
it's-
you're just trying to get out of the conversation.
that,
but
and it also maybe feels like to me, Crosshair still kind of has his guard up, and
Sure.
he's just kind of saying, it's kind of more like it's none of your business.
yeah, it is kind of
yeah.
I think what he's getting there. But I think there's
It's-
another kernel to this, which is that he says, "I did betray them after they betrayed me." The difference here is that the Bad Batch never betrayed Crosshair.
right.
He betrayed them.
Yes.
And so, maybe he's saying that he felt betrayed by them, right? And so that's why he turned his back on them originally,
Right.
which is kind of like he's communicating that to Hunter in a kind of a roundabout way. It's
Right.
obviously not very direct, but the other thing is that they didn't betray him specifically, but they betrayed his ideals.
Yes, and
Right?
I
Yeah.
understand how like he would feel like he was betrayed back then by
Sure.
them because he was just following orders and he was just doing what he thought they were supposed to
Right.
be doing, and they were the ones that were going the other way, right? So
Right. So Hunter isn't sure how to react here. I think when he learns that information, he's like, "Oh, you killed an Imperial officer. Okay, interesting." But Crosshair quickly shifts the tone. He says, "Don't pretend like this is all about me. I tried to warn you, Hunter. I risked everything to send you that message. You ignored it. You let Omega be taken to Tantus. She went through what she did because you failed. You're angry because she escaped with my help, not yours." Which it feels like he's using this as not as a shield but as a sword
yeah,
to cut
oh, yeah.
at Hunter. But I don't. And she has every right to say, "I did the work to try to keep her out of the prison and also to get her out." But she
Yeah.
also did a lot of that work. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
it's
But
true.
but
He did kept saying he was gonna just leave or
Right.
tell it's like, yeah, you did help like eventually once she broke you out.
yeah, but that's kind of what she also broke him out of his
Yes.
funk, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like he wants to put this back on Hunter, but I don't think this is really on Hunter.
no.
So I don't like how do you read this piece of it?
I think it's just again, kind of how you said he's using it to kind of hurt Hunter. I think he wants to cause a little bit of pain
right.
here. Like he's feeling attacked, so he's attacking back. It's that kind of over defensiveness of I need to shift the blame here.
Well,
too.
and what's Hunter's probably most shameful moment is probably when Omega was captured,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
When he felt powerless to do anything when she's being taken. So
Right.
he kind of went straight for the jugular there.
Yeah.
He does make a strong point though that hey, I risked a lot to
Yeah.
get you that information that they were looking for her,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't treat that seriously enough, and
Yeah.
that probably felt
And that
like an
is
insult.
that
too.
is true
Yeah.
too. Like it's like he did try, and you can't say that he didn't.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So it's like from his perspective, it's like, how dare you question me,
Mhm.
despite all I risk to help Omega, which is so much of what their purpose is now.
You're right.
This, by the way, this exchange could have been like the whole episode. We could have
Yeah.
just done this the whole episode. It would have been so interesting. We don't have to do with the worm, but the worm.
and then the worm shows up.
And then the worm arrives. I love this too because then Hunter clenches his fist. He wants to punch him, right? That's a really interesting. That's the most emotion we've seen from Hunter maybe ever. And then before they can come to blows, Hunter senses something and pushes Crosshair out of the way as a giant ice worm, spelt with a Y, emerges from the snow and sinks their ship into the ice, which allows them so they can't just run away. The ice worm. This is ice worm WYRM. This is from StarWars.com. Moving in a corkscrew pattern, the ice worms of Barton 4 traverse the snowy terrain by tunneling underground and burrowing toward their prey. Hardened shells provide a protective barrier from the elements and would-be predators, while a series of blowholes allow the worms to breathe when breaching through the surface. Using their snapping jaws to grab at their target, but well-placed sensors emitting high-pitched frequency have proven successful in keeping these beasts away from the rare depot or encampment. The length, 34.8 meters. So pretty big.
It's a big worm.
Yeah. I also like this. This is also from StarWars.com. The ice worm creatures are much less active in the coldest seasons, which is why it never attacked when Crosshair was stationed at the snowy base in Season 2. If you compared their weather patterns in this episode of The Outpost, you can see that Barton 4 is now experiencing a slightly warmer season.
Okay, there we go.
Isn't that hilarious? Yeah. I thought that
Very
was so funny that they
convenient.
wrote that up. We have to explain this somehow.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, why were these things never around? Why did they not attack the raiders? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's just a sleepy worm before.
Yes. It's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't need that page
And
anymore.
okay, it's funny that you said this earlier about how anytime you deal with like worms, like sandworms, or everyone thinks about Dune, but I think about Tremors.
Oh, yeah, or Holes.
Holes?
Have you ever seen Holes?
Is that
the
like with Shia LaBeouf?
the Shia LaBeouf
Is there
movie?
worms in that
I
one?
thought so. Maybe I'm crazy.
remember.
Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, hold on. Let me double check that.
Is there
Holes?
sandworms?
Are there sandworms in the movie Holes? Holes, the film, 2003, American neo-Western comedy drama, filmed by Andrew Davis. Let's see. Let's search the Wikipedia for worm. Looks like a no. That
Yeah,
looks
I was
like,
like,
looks like a no from me, dog.
Don't
So
think there's worms
creature, perhaps. What about creatures? Are creatures under
in that.
there?
Could be.
Creatures? No creatures. Okay. All right. Well, I was wrong. So yeah, Tremors is a
But
much
Tremors is the
more
the
accurate.
movie for me that
Yeah.
I always think about when it's
Yeah,
about
that's
any-
fair.
Yeah,
That's there's also giant worms in that.
yeah, which is also probably obviously taken from Dune.
Yeah, and they use all the same rules. Like if you stand on a rock, they can't get you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they feel right by
right.
the vibrations.
The vibrations
yeah.
of the sand. Anyway, after making their way back to safety, just in time, they take stock of the situation, and then this is when they jump into action, and like the exposition comes fast and loose. So I guess we know what the sensors were meant to keep out, which is a
Yes.
funny line. They quickly jump into action. Echo rightly points out that they need to get the sensors back online before they can dig out the ship. Again, they need to reference that because otherwise it's just
Yeah.
like, well, they can just leave. There is apparently a, quote, fuse box for the reserve energy grid in the back of the compound. It needs to be reset manually, says Crosshair off screen, which I felt like a very odd, like, ADR insertion.
Right.
Wrecker volunteers to do that job. Omega will reset everything once the power is back. Hunter points out that they'll have to draw the creature back outside the perimeter before the power's back on, or they'll be trapped inside with it. Crosshair volunteers, but Hunter says he'll go with him. Do you think Hunter's saying that as like not alone because he doesn't trust him, or because he still wants to like? It felt like there was a little bit more to it than just the continuing being distrusting of him, but maybe I'm overreading that.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily distrusting, but
So we just don't operate that way. Yeah.
that and
He says not alone, right? He's like, not alone, I'll go with you, right?
Yeah, I think it's like you're gonna need my help kind of thing,
Right.
I think it's not necessarily
They're kind of over that right now at that moment.
Yeah.
Or like they don't have time to think about anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Echo will do the useless job of spotting them from the tower. Because it travels underground, so not helpful.
Doesn't it sometimes have?
It does come up at the little bit of the thing, yeah. So he has
But
a little bit of
still.
yeah, but come on.
Yeah.
You have, first of all, why is Omega operating the computer and you
Yeah.
literally have the scomp arm do something with it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Come on, Echo. Okay. Everyone makes a break for it, with Hunter almost being caught after Crosshair takes a couple shots at the worm, even though it's underground. Unfortunately, he still falls into an ice cave below. I guess the tunnels that the worm makes underneath. Wrecker also makes a run for it, and he makes the funny line is, why is there always such a huge monster? But again, we talked about that. It's kind of like, sure, I guess you can just say that and excuse it away, but not really.
Yeah.
This is where Echo is not much help. Oh, I can't see it. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing too. Unfortunately, when there are so many characters,
You gotta
right?
give them something all to do.
It's that, and you can't just give them something small to deal with. Like, it can't just be a small creature, because then it's not enough
Right.
of a threat. It's
Right.
got to be something relatively big. It's either big bad empire or giant creature.
Right.
So
Remember how giant those creatures were in The Mandalorian season 3? Like so huge, they're like Godzilla sized. Remember that? They like
That's
emerge
so-
on Mandalore. They come out of the ground.
Oh yeah,
That giant turtle thing.
yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was wild. This thing is puny compared to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Wrecker yells down, telling Hunter to make his way outside the perimeter, inside the caves. Like, hey, just use the tunnels and you'll find a way out. Hopefully, it's kind of the plan. As he's yelling down here, this is where my one moment where I'm like, I love me some D. Bradley Baker, but he sounds exactly like Tech
Right. Yeah.
yelling down here, and I had you double.
Yeah,
check
you
this with
replayed
me.
it for me, and you were kind of correct. It did for a second there sound like Tech.
A rare mistake from D. Bradley Baker.
I think it's not. I think it's just because he's far away too. Like
It's
he's
hard to do the
he's
quiet
talking down
crosshair voice,
He's
yeah.
like talking down a hole. So I think that kind of has something to
Sure.
do with it. But yeah, you're right. It was a little
I just feel like it
techy.
had that like extra Britishy.
Yeah, it like
sound
didn't
to
have the rasp
Yeah.
as much that Crosshair normally has.
Right.
So
Anyway, so he has Batcher to help track Hunter. I guess I'm not sure. Batcher also needs something to do. So
yeah,
there he is. By the way, domesticated so quickly, that animal.
real smart.
Really
too.
smart.
Just knows
Yeah.
exactly what they need him
Yes.
to do or her to do.
Yes.
Love it though.
It's a good dog.
Yeah, it's a good dog.
It's a
Love a
good
good
dog.
dog.
Yeah. The worm is now chasing Crosshair with Echo giving him a heads up, finally doing something. He takes more shots. This time he gets a clean shot inside of the mouth as it emerges. This is enough to stun it and send it off on another course. He says, I think I made it more angry, which is a classic. I feel like that's anytime you're dealing with giant monsters, I feel like it's got to do something like that. Crosshair finds the fuse box and primes it manually. This is a direct reference to Jurassic Park. It 100%
Again,
is
yeah.
where they have to like load the
Yeah.
thing and then reset the power, and that's when they're going through the vault, the raptor
Right.
section, right?
Yes.
Lots of Jurassic Park references this season. In my
Yeah,
opinion.
it's interesting. I like it though.
Yeah, it is a classic. Now only 400 meters, which is half a kilometer essentially, from the perimeter, Crosshair is still making his way through the caves. Batcher finds a weak point in the ice with Batcher's help just outside the perimeter. They'll be able to dig a hole or try, as they joke about. He's like, listen, I'll try to get you out. He's like, try.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I'm glad you heard me right.
Yeah.
Which is
Even in this, just the sarcasm.
It's just
I
you gotta
really like
love
it.
his tude, right?
Yeah.
Back with Wrecker, he's flipping more switches now. He starts the power up. Hunter continues through the caves. He says it's getting tighter, so he's like worried that they're not gonna converge at the same spot. But there's only like 5 minutes left in the episode, so there's no way that it doesn't. They need to hold off activating the perimeter until the worm is outside the perimeter. They remind us on that. Hunter spots the worm inside the tunnel, already outside the perimeter, which is a fun little twist.
Yeah.
Just as Crosshair finishes digging out the hole, he extends the butt of his rifle to help pull Hunter out just before he's eaten.
Yeah.
The worm follows them up out of the ice and follows them towards the perimeter, but they get past it just in time. I do like Batcher's kind of like, come at me, bro.
Yeah. It's like, hold me back.
Yeah.
Hold me back.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, they would kick your butt, man.
Yeah.
I know you take on
100%.
space bears all the time, but I don't know if this
It's like
one's
covered in armor.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it could eat you in a bite.
Yeah. Hunter and Wrecker then share a moment here. They don't really say anything, but as you said, it's like they've saved each other's life, so
Yeah.
now it's they're even, as it were,
Mhm.
right? Hunter and Wrecker and Batcher make their way back, and everyone is pretty happy. The sun is setting. The music is happy. Echo jokes that they've managed to patch things up without there being any bloodshed, so
Yeah.
he considers it progress, which is funny. Important to remember, like I'm like, how did he know? But I guess he was part of the team for a while, even though not that long. Omega is worried that the intel won't be enough, but Echo reassures her that they're that much closer to freeing those clones, which I guess is now the main thrust of the series. Feels like not enough. Like I think I need more stakes, something a bigger, more interesting mission than going back to Tantus to free clones.
I mean, they do bring up, I think it's in this episode when they're kind of sitting around the table there, that Omega says something about how she didn't get to see what was inside the vaults.
Right.
Which is
yeah,
like,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it
that's a
is
good
nice
point.
that they like bring
That's a
back the
good point.
vaults. So we're like, okay, like maybe they're gonna show us what's in those vaults. Might be kind of cool.
Yeah. I want to know what's in those vaults.
Yeah.
And also
So-
tell us what the deal is with those like assassin clones or whatever.
Yeah. yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I care less about that, but I mean, yeah. So there are still some like interesting, obviously still some
Right.
interesting things that we can go through, but yeah, I get what you mean though. About you want like a little more than it just being about saving the clones on Tantus, but
Well, it just because it feels like, hey, you escaped that prison. As I said before, it's not her responsibility. I know she feels like it is,
right.
but like Hunter should be coaching her on this and being like, I understand how you feel, but we need to make sure we're prepared and all that kind of stuff before we would even attempt something like
of
this.
Course.
And like, it's extremely dangerous and probably,
Well, especially because they want
and
her
they
back
want her
there.
back.
Yeah,
exactly.
so-
So there's a lot of that
Mhm.
it just feels like we had more clear stakes or like a clearer mission. Like, hey, we're looking for our freedom. Made sense for the
Right.
first 2 seasons.
Yes.
Now they
yes.
kind of have their freedom, and it feels like they're not abusing it in the sense that like this was a pretty low stakes mission, despite
Mhm.
the logline saying it's a quote unquote dangerous mission.
Right. Yeah.
But for me, I just feel like there's something missing. I need another spark of intrigue to carry me through. Because like if it's just them searching for intel for Tantus, I'm gonna feel a little unsatisfied.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so they finish by digging out the ship. Crosshair makes another plea to Hunter. This is kind of the last good moment of the episode. I like the staging here too, the blocking where they have like they're looking at each other or looking the same direction. Crosshair doesn't want to look at Hunter as
Right.
it says this.
Right.
So you kind of go. You got to do the focus pull, which is also a thing that you don't have to do necessarily in animation, but you get to animate it and it's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, it looks good. So they're talking. He's like, "Listen, I have to make one more confession." Essentially, he said, "I thought I knew what I was getting into. I thought I was being a good soldier."
Right.
And I think that, to be honest, it's not much of a confession because I think we all kind of knew that, and I think
Yeah.
it's good for him to say it, no doubt.
No, I do. I think it's more he's acknowledging it, and it's kind of more of like an apology to me.
Like, hey,
is-
I was wrong.
Yeah, he's saying like I was wrong. He's like he thought
Right. He's
that he
yeah.
was doing the right thing, and he wasn't, and he realizes that now. So I
Right.
think in the most Crosshair way, this is
it's the closest you're gonna get to,
you're
and I'm
gonna
sorry.
get
Yeah.
to, and I'm sorry, and this is the closest you're gonna get to like that kind of softness. But I think
Right.
you can kind of feel that he's got that shame
Yes,
about it.
I think so.
and that's what I think Hunter inevitably needs to see from
Yes.
Crosshair. He needs to see that like kind of apology, that regret, to know that he feels what they're feeling.
Yeah, and I
right?
think he wants to see it in action, and I think he
Yes,
does a lot
yeah.
in this episode. So that will carry them. I think that if the series is done with this dynamic, I think that's a mistake. I think they need to continue building on this like building of bridges between Crosshair and the rest of the team.
Right.
I like Hunter's response, which is no one really understood what was happening back then.
Right.
Right? Like it was.
And that's so true. It was
It-
like such chaos
Exactly.
for them, and yeah.
It fell apart so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There was forces outside their control that they knew nothing about.
Right.
And then it just spiraled out of control. So it's fair. And he says, so Crosshair continues to say, I've done things, I've made mistakes, right? What he's saying here is I've done terrible things, if you can fill in the
Yeah.
blanks, right? And I think this if you're going to appeal to Crosshair, appealing to his sense of morality is probably a good way to do it. And he says,
Right.
I have regrets too, Crosshair. All we can do is keep trying to be better, and who knows, there just might be hope for us yet.
Right.
Right? And so I think that is Hunter's mission, which is to not redeem himself necessarily, because I don't think he thinks as he says, he knows he has regrets, but it's to instead of just following orders, he wants to drive his own life, and to do that means to live with your regrets, and and instead of just passing the buck, which is the just following orders concept, right?
Right. Yeah.
So he's basically saying, hey, if you adopt that same mentality, it's not about whether or not you can or can't make up for your mistakes. It's the fact that you're trying that matters.
Yeah. Exactly. and like owning up to them too.
Yeah.
It's important. But,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as the sun sets, he looks back at the vulture one last time before heading back into the ship, and then we cut to credits.
Mm-hmm.
That is the episode. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting there, right? You wanted a little bit more of the chatter in this one that we didn't quite get enough of,
Yeah.
but at least we're moving forward, and like maybe we can see a little bit of a deeper conversation on the ship or something after that. Like they needed to kind of go through this relatively goofy kind of life-threatening thing together, right? First, to kind of just get the overall nastiness out of the way, and then maybe they can be a little bit more open and
I hope so.
Forward,
Ultimately, I just would like to see them continue to grow this dynamic. It's the most interesting thing happening right now.
Yeah, because like you said, it seems like Omega's accepted him back. Echo doesn't really care. He's more business. Wrecker, I don't know. He gave them both that big bear hug at the end.
Yeah,
like kind of like knocks them together, right? So Hunter seems on board. Like the only kind of friction is Crosshair and Hunter. So I do think that still needs a little bit more rounding out. So hopefully we can just see a little more talking next episode, and to kind of really round out this
I think those next 2 episodes
angle,
I think it's a double drop. I think there's going to be a big mission.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2-parter.
Yeah.
It's going to be mostly action heavy, but the best we can hope for is that the action speaks to these same themes, and that we get to explore them through action, which we kind of do here, but it feels like the most kind of basic way of doing it.
Right.
So hopefully next week we get something a little bit more exciting. As again, reminder, the episode will be a little late next week, as we'll be recording likely on Saturday. So stay tuned for that. On that note, we will wrap it up there. Thank you for everyone for listening. Thank you for supporting the show if you are a Patreon subscriber, or if you left a review like I asked. Thank you for that. We'll be back next week with more small screen Star Wars, but until then, may the Force be with you. Where's the end screen? End screen, there it is.